There's a kind of rejection that doesn't just hurt your heart. It rearranges your entire inner world. It doesn't feel like someone saying no to you. It feels like reality itself pulling away, as if something sacred almost touched your life and then vanished. You replay every moment, every look, every word. And the question that haunts you isn't, why did they leave? It's, why did it feel so real, if it was never meant to last? Most people will tell you the same thing. They weren't ready. They didn't care enough. If they wanted you, they wouldn't have walked away. And sometimes, on the surface, that's true. But Carl Jung saw something far deeper happening in experiences like this. Something that has nothing to do with unworthiness, nothing to do with bad timing, and everything to do with awakening. Because in Jungian psychology, rejection is not always a failure. Sometimes it is the first initiation of true love. This video is not going to help you forget them. It's not going to tell you they were wrong or that you were foolish. Instead, it will help you understand what just happened to your psyche, to your ego, and to your soul. Because once you understand that, the rejection stops feeling like a punishment and starts revealing itself as a threshold. True love doesn't feel dangerous to the soul, it feels dangerous to the ego. That distinction changes everything, because when most people think of the ego, they imagine arrogance or selfishness. But in Jungian psychology, the ego is something far more basic and far more fragile. The ego is your sense of who you are. It's the story you tell yourself that says, this is me, this is my role, this is where I end and the world begins. And above all else, the ego is obsessed with one thing: control. Not control to dominate, control to survive. The ego wants predictability. It wants stability. It wants clear boundaries so it knows where it stands. Now imagine what happens when you encounter true love. Not attraction, not comfort, not companionship, but the kind of connection that dissolves time, the kind that sees through your defenses without asking permission, the kind that doesn't just want to be with you, but wants to meet you completely. To the soul, this feels like recognition, like remembering something ancient, like coming home. But to the ego, it feels like annihilation, because true love doesn't respect the borders the ego spent years building. It doesn't care about your carefully constructed identity. It doesn't negotiate with your coping strategies. It asks you to soften where you learn to harden, to open where you learn to protect, to risk losing the version of yourself that once kept you safe. And when the ego hears that request, it doesn't hear love, it hears death. This is why so many deep connections trigger panic instead of peace. Why closeness suddenly feels suffocating. Why warmth turns into distance without warning. The ego is not evil for this. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Think of it like this. Imagine spending your entire life in a dark cave. Your eyes adapt to the shadows. You learn how to survive there. You build your identity around what you can see in the dark. Then one day, someone pulls you toward the entrance and forces you to look directly at the midday sun. You don't marvel at the light. You scream. You cover your eyes. You run back into the cave, not because the light is bad, but because your eyes aren't ready. This is what happens when someone pulls away after a moment of deep intimacy. They are not rejecting the light. They are protecting themselves from blindness, not because the connection meant nothing, but because it meant more than the ego could contain. And until you understand this, you will keep mistaking ego panic for lack of love. They didn't leave because it meant nothing. They left because it meant too much. When a connection reaches a certain depth, something ancient activates in the nervous system. Something far older than logic language, or romance. It's called the fight or flight response. This response wasn't designed for love, it was designed for survival. When the psyche senses a threat to its structure, it doesn't pause to analyze meaning, it reacts. And here's the uncomfortable truth. True intimacy often registers as danger to the ego, not because love is harmful, but because love demands change. The ego is built to maintain what already exists. It survives by repetition, by keeping you recognizable to yourself and to the world. But deep connection doesn't want to preserve you. It wants to transform you. It asks questions the ego cannot answer safely. Who are you without your defenses? Who are you without control? Who are you if you stop performing the identity that once protected you? When those questions arise, the ego doesn't hear curiosity. It hears an alarm, so the body responds before the mind can intervene. The warmth turns cold, the texts slow down. Distance appears where closeness once lived. This isn't strategy, it's instinct. Rejection, in these moments, is not a calculated decision. It's a reflex, a psychic muscle, tightening to avoid collapse. Think of an animal caught in a trap. It doesn't analyze whether the trap is intentional or loving. It feels pressure and pulls away. In the same way, when love threatens to dismantle a person's emotional architecture, the psyche reacts with withdrawal. And this is why the timing feels so cruel. They don't leave at the beginning. They don't leave when things are shallow. They leave at the peak, right when vulnerability opens, right when honesty deepens, right when something real begins to take shape, because that's the moment the ego realizes it can no longer remain intact. Carl Jung understood this dynamic clearly. He believed that the ego resists any force that challenges its supremacy, even if that force is love. And so, when love asks for evolution, the ego chooses familiarity instead. Not because familiarity is better, but because it feels survivable. This is why chasing someone who is running rarely brings them closer. You are asking a frightened system to feel safe by moving faster into what terrifies it. And until the ego no longer equates transformation with annihilation, distance feels safer than connection. But ego panic is only the first layer. Beneath it lies something even deeper, something far more revealing about why rejection feels so personal and why it hurts the way it does. You weren't rejected by them. You were rejected by the fantasy you projected onto them. That sentence is uncomfortable because it pulls the pain out of the story you've been telling yourself and places it somewhere far closer to home. Carl Jung believed that when we fall deeply in love, especially in the beginning, we are not actually seeing the other person. We are seeing ourselves. More precisely, we are seeing a hidden image inside our own psyche, what Jung called the Anima and Animus. Within every man lives an unconscious feminine image. Within every woman lives an unconscious masculine image. These inner figures are not rational. They are symbolic, emotional, idealized. They carry everything we long for, everything we've lost, everything we believe will finally make us whole. And when we meet someone who resonates with that image, someone who fits it just enough, something electric happens. The mind calls it chemistry, the heart calls it destiny, but the psyche knows what's really happening. We project. Projection is not deception, it's intimacy without awareness. You place your inner image onto another human being and then fall in love with what you see reflected back. This is why the beginning feels so intoxicating. The honeymoon phase is not just romance, it's narcissistic enchantment. Not narcissism in the cruel sense, but in the psychological one. You are falling in love with a version of yourself you haven't fully lived yet. They feel perfect because they are carrying your ideal. They feel safe because you aren't actually meeting them. You're meeting your own unconscious longing, And this is why everything feels effortless at first. There are no sharp edges, no contradictions, no real friction, because you're not interacting with a person, you're interacting with a hologram. And here is the part most people never understand. Rejection is the moment the hologram breaks. It happens when the other person acts in a way that contradicts the role your psyche assigned them. They hesitate, they pull back, they disappoint you, they reveal a limit. And suddenly the magic collapses, not because love disappeared, but because illusion died. This is the most painful moment in a deep connection. Because what breaks isn't just the relationship. What breaks is the protection the fantasy provided. As long as you were in projection, you didn't have to love a real, flawed, unpredictable human being. You didn't have to risk being seen fully yourself. The illusion kept everything suspended in perfection. But Jung was clear about this. You cannot love a projection. You can only love a person once the projection is withdrawn. This is why rejection hurts the way it does. You didn't lose love. You lost the illusion that protected you from loving for real. And most people stop here and they say, the spark is gone. They're not who I thought they were. It wasn't real after all. So they leave, or they chase, or they look for someone new to project onto. But for those who are meant to experience true love, this moment is not the end. It is the threshold. Rejection forces you to reclaim your projection, to take back the image you placed outside yourself, to recognize that what you saw in them was something trying to be born within you. And when that happens, the pain stops being meaningless because you realize, this connection was never meant to complete you, it was meant to awaken you. And that awakening doesn't happen in enchantment, it happens in the shattering of illusion. But this is still not the deepest layer, because beneath the broken fantasy lies something even more personal. The part of you that rejection exposes and the shadow it refuses to let you ignore. Rejection hurts because it touches the part of you you've been rejecting your whole life. That's the part no one prepares you for. Because on the surface, rejection feels like something someone else did to you. They pulled away, they changed, they chose distance. But psychologically, something far more intimate is happening. Carl Jung called this the mirror effect. In deep relationships, especially those that feel fated or intense, the other person stops being just a partner. They become a mirror, not a flattering one, not a polite one, a precise one. They reflect back what already exists inside you, including the parts you learn to hide, suppress, or deny in order to survive. This is why rejection doesn't just hurt, it collapses you. It doesn't land on the surface of your personality. It goes straight to the core wound, the place where an old belief lives quietly, often unconsciously. I am not enough. I am too much. I don't get to be chosen. You may not walk around thinking these thoughts, you may even believe you've healed them, but rejection activates them instantly because it bypasses logic and goes straight to memory, not conscious memory, emotional memory. When someone pulls away, the pain you feel is rarely proportional to the event. A delayed text shouldn't shatter your sense of worth. A moment of distance shouldn't feel like abandonment. And yet, it does. Because the rejection didn't create the wound. It revealed it. The mirror didn't invent the shadow, it exposed it. Jung believed that the shadow is made of everything we were taught not to be. The needy parts, the angry parts, the afraid parts, emotional, or too much for others to hold. So we rejected them first. We learned to say, don't need, don't feel, don't ask, don't expect. And then we meet someone who sees us deeply enough to bypass those defenses. They get close enough to activate the shadow, and suddenly their distance feels unbearable. But here is the most difficult truth of all. You were not abandoned by them. You were abandoned by yourself. The moment the old wound took over, because in that moment you didn't stand with your fear, you judged it, you panicked about it, you tried to escape it, you made their behavior responsible for something that had been living inside you for years. This is why Jung said something so radical, so confronting. Until you accept your shadow, every distance will feel like rejection. As long as you reject your own vulnerability, you will experience other people's boundaries as abandonment. As long as you shame your own need for connection, you will feel humiliated when someone steps back. As long as you believe that being loved means being chosen without hesitation, any pause will feel like proof you are unworthy. The pain is real, but it is not coming from where you think. Rejection is not showing you what is wrong with you. It is showing you where you learned to turn against yourself. And this is why shadow work is unavoidable in true love, not to fix the relationship, but to stop the internal war. Because the moment you stop rejecting your own shadow, something profound happens. Distance stops feeling like danger. Silence stops feeling like punishment. Uncertainty stops feeling like annihilation. You begin to stand with yourself instead of collapsing inward. And only then does rejection lose its power to define you, because when you stop abandoning yourself, no one else ever truly can. And this brings us to the most difficult and most sacred phase of all, the initiation. The moment rejection stops being a wound and becomes a doorway. Every initiation begins with loss. Across ancient cultures, no one became an adult without passing through something that broke them. A separation, a trial, a descent into darkness. Psychologically, true love follows the same law. When a connection reaches the point of rejection, something is being demanded of you that the ego cannot survive. This is not punishment. This is initiation. Carl Jung described this phase as ego death, the moment when the identity you built to be loved, chosen, and safe can no longer hold. The ego wants answers, it wants reassurance, it wants to be restored to how things were, but initiation doesn't restore, it strips. This is why the rejection feels unbearable at first. You're not just losing a person, you're losing the version of yourself that depended on them. And this is where the dark night of the soul begins. The dark night is not depression, it's not weakness, it's the collapse of meaning. The familiar story no longer works, the old strategies no longer soothe you. Distraction fails, hope feels thin, you sit with silence, not because you want to, but because nothing else is left. And in that silence, something crucial is revealed. There are two very different kinds of rejection, divine rejection and abuse. Abuse shrinks you, it erodes your sense of self. It keeps you small, anxious, and afraid. Divine rejection does the opposite. It hurts, but it strengthens, it forces you inward, it dismantles dependency, it returns your attention to yourself. Divine rejection does not say, you are unworthy. It says, you are not finished yet. It removes what you were clinging to, so you can no longer avoid becoming whole. This is the fire. The moment where your pride burns, your illusions burn, your need to be rescued burns. And what remains is not emptiness, but presence. You begin to feel yourself again, not as someone reaching outward, but as someone standing inwardly. This is where the initiation completes itself, because the love you are seeking cannot meet you until the version of you that needs it dies. The version that collapses in silence, the version that mistakes longing for love. That version must end, not to punish you, Shad, but to free you. Only then does love stop being a remedy for pain and become a meeting of two whole beings. Rejection is the gate. The ego believes it is being destroyed, but the soul knows better. Something false is ending so something real can finally begin. And when you step through this fire, when you stop chasing, stop proving, stop pleading, you don't become harder, You become grounded, and from that ground, love no longer arrives as a savior, but as a companion. If you take only one thing from this video, let it be this. Rejection is not a no, it's a not yet. A pause, there on purpose. When something real ends in distance instead of closure, the mind panics. But the soul doesn't work on timelines, it works on readiness, and sometimes what feels like loss is simply life saying, become whole first. So if you're in the middle of this separation, if the silence feels heavier than the words ever were, listen carefully. Don't chase, don't collapse, don't try to prove your worth by reaching outward. This distance is not empty, it is sacred. It is the space where projection dissolves, where the ego quiets, where the parts of you that were hidden finally come forward to be met. Nothing is being taken from you, something is being returned. Your attention, your energy, your center. And I know how hard that is to hear when your heart still aches. But the work of true love does not begin in union. It begins in integration. It begins when you stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, what part of me is asking to be held right now? If this video spoke to something real inside you, not just your thoughts, but your body, your memory, your nervous system, I want you to mark this moment, not for me, for yourself. Type this in the comments if you're ready. I accept the mirror. I choose to become whole. Let it be a declaration, not to the algorithm, but to your own psyche. And remember this as you step back into your life, the way forward will not come from chasing answers outside yourself. The only way out is in. I'll see you in the next journey,